upon a time, there was a poor shoemaker. He made excellent shoes and worked very hard. But even then, he could not earn enough to support himself and his family. He became so poor that he could not even afford to buy the leather he needed to make the shoes. He had just enough to make one last pair. He cut them out with great care and put the pieces on his workbench so that he could sew them together the next morning.
Once I have sold this pair, I shall need all the money to buy food for my family. I will not be able to buy any new leather,
he said to himself. That night, he left his scissors, chisel, hammer, and nails on his work table. The next morning, he woke up early and went down to his workshop. He saw that the shoes proved to be from the very pieces of leather he had kept the night before. He immediately put the fine pair of shoes in the window of his shop.
Who in the world could have done this great service for me?
He asked himself. A rich man walked into his shop and bought the shoes for a fancy price. The shoemaker was very happy. He immediately went out and purchased plenty of food for his family and some more leather. That afternoon, he cut out 2 pairs of shoes and kept all the pieces on the bench so that he could sew them the next day. Then he went upstairs to enjoy the good meal with his family.
My goodness!
He shouted the next morning when he found 2 pairs of beautifully finished shoes on his workbench.
Who could make such fine shoes and so quickly?
He put them in his shop window, and some wealthy people came in and paid a great deal of money for them. The happy shoemaker went right out and bought even more leather. For weeks and then months, this continued. Whether the shoemaker cut 2 pairs or 4 pairs, the fine new shoes were always ready the next morning. Soon his small shop was crowded with customers. He cut out many types of shoes: stiff boots lined with fur, delicate slippers for dancers, walking shoes for ladies, tiny shoes for children. The little shop prospered and he was soon a rich man. As the shoemaker and his wife sat by the fire one night, he said,
One of these days I shall find out who has been helping us.
We would hide behind the cupboard in your workroom, she said. That way we would find out just who your helpers are. And that is just what they did. That evening, when the clock struck 12, the shoemaker and his wife heard a noise. 2 tiny men, each with a bag of tools, came into the shop. They took the scissors and cut the leather. The 2 men climbed onto the workbench and began working. Their little hands stitched and their little hammers tapped through the whole night.
They are so small and they make such beautiful shoes in no time at all,
the shoemaker whispered to his wife. Indeed, the ells were about the size of his needles. Quite, his wife answered. See how they are cleaning up now. And in an instant, the 2 ells had disappeared. The next day, the shoemaker's wife said, Those little elves have done so much good for us. Since it is nearly Christmas, we should make some gifts for them.
Yes,
cried the shoemaker.
I will make some boots that will fit them, and you can make some clothes.
On Christmas Eve, the presents were laid out upon the workbench. 2 tiny jackets, 2 pairs of trousers, and 2 little woolen caps. They also left out a plate of good things to eat and drink. Then they hid once again behind the cupboard and waited to see what would happen. Just as before the elves appeared at the stroke of midnight, they jumped onto the bench to begin their work. But when they saw all the presents, they began to laugh and shout with joy. They tried on all the clothes and then helped themselves to the food and drink. Then they jumped down, danced excitedly around the workroom, and disappeared. After Christmas, the shoemaker cut out his leather as he always had, but the 2 elves never returned. I think they may have heard us whispering, his wife said. Elves are very shy.
I know. I will miss their help.
The shoemaker said.
But we will manage. The shop is always so busy now. But my stitches will never be as tight and small as theirs.
The shoemaker continued to prosper, but he and his family always remembered the good elves who had helped them during their hard times. And each and every Christmas Eve from that year onwards, they gathered around the fire to drink a toast to their tiny friends. Recap. In this story, we came across some of the common tools used by a cobbler. They are scissors, chisel, hammer, and nails. Some of the tools used by other professions are: the carpenter uses a saw and a chisel. A gardener uses trowel, rakes, and spade. A mechanic uses jack and spanners.